Today's video is on temptation, and I just want to quickly go over this. Is that temptation is something that makes you want to do something. So some people say like, okay, well, I have this brownie, okay, and it might not be the best idea to eat this brownie, but it's tempting to because it smells and it looks good. So temptation is something that makes sin look and smell good, something like that. You guys understand what I'm trying to say, and it's something that leads you to it. We know that it's not healthy to eat that brownie, but it looks good and it smells good. Temptation is something that that Satan tries to coat sin, and that he tries to coat it into. He tries to coat that sin into with temptation and make it look good, but it really, when you eat that brownie, it's going to give you all these kind of calories. It's not good. That's basically the best example I can give of temptation. Temptation itself is not a sin because we can't control what we're tempted by, but we can control how we handle that temptation, how we handle being in this situation. We can either look to God and seek his strength so that we will be strong enough to withstand this temptation, or we can try to do it on our own and not seek God and not be strong enough to withstand this temptation, and we fall into it. And that sin leads us into more sin and into death and destruction. The first verse I'm going over is in 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1. It says, Satan rose up against Israel and caused David to take a census of the people of Israel. So this pretty much explains that no matter how close you are to God, that you will still experience temptation. Many people know who David is. They know that it says in the Bible that he was a man that was after God's heart. He was a very godly man. He was the boy that had so much faith in God that he was able to kill Goliath as a boy with just a couple of stones and a slingshot. But he still was experiencing temptation during this time. He was very close to God, but he still experienced temptation. This shows that we live in a world that is the reason that we are able to still experience temptation is that we live in a world that is so full of sin, that sin is taunted as something that is normal, something that people don't view it as something that's leading you not just away from God, but they don't realize that it's leading you to a worse life. This shows the importance that we need to be alert at all times, that we need to put the armor of God, and we need to learn. We need to learn why it's important to and how we can endure temptation. If you guys understand what I'm saying, we need to learn how we can endure temptation through the strength of God, for we can do anything through Christ who strengthens us. And we need to just stay alert, to not be naive about things like, okay, well, I'm a man of God now, so I can just sit back and I'll be fine because God's protecting me. But when we do that, we make ourselves vulnerable. When we do not put the armor of God on us, we make ourselves vulnerable to temptation. And when we don't pursue to build up our faith, trusting God, then we will not have the strength to withstand that temptation. So the next verse that we're going over is in James chapter 1, verse 13, and this verse says, "And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else." Some people, they are including me. There was this time in my point in my life that I would experience temptation. Like I felt like after I asked Jesus into my heart, like I felt like everything should be easy. And I felt like, God, why are you still allowing this temptation to come at me? God is not the one that's tempting you. It's Satan that is tempting you. Satan is going to try his best to stray you away from God. And it's God it's not God that's tempting you, but God is giving you strength to withstand that temptation. Instead of looking at God like he's the one that's tempting me, but look at him, he's the one that's saving me, that's giving me this strength, that's giving me the faith that now I'm in the armor that I am able to withstand this temptation. That's how this verse has helped me so much to know that everything that God does is not to push me away from him, but is to bring me closer to him. Verse is in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. It says, The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure. No temptation that we face is impossible. No temptation that we face is impossible to get through. Every temptation that we face, every hardship that we face, Jesus has already faced. And he endured it. He was an innocent man as he died on the cross, and he endured all those. And that gives us the strength. That automatically gives us the strength through Jesus, that we have the strength and that we have the authority over all sin and death, and that we already have everything that we need to withstand this temptation. We have everything that we need. God will never put us into a situation where we're like, okay, well, I should have read that extra chapter because I don't know what to do during this moment. But God will always provide you a way out of something. Nothing is ever too hard for you to withstand, but it's always a way out. And it's a choice whether or not you fall into that or whether or not you stand firm in God's strength. Every temptation and every hardship that we face now, Jesus has already withstood. He endured every single temptation that we face. And through Jesus, we have the strength that we need to endure every temptation. We already have, and we have already received when he died on the cross and he withstood every temptation. We received all the strength. We received all of the victory over this sin, over this temptation that we need to be able to withstand it. No temptation that we face is too hard. No situation that we're in is too hard to withstand. It's to the point where it's a choice whether or not we stand firm in God or we give in to that temptation. In Luke chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, it says, "Then Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan River. He was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where he was tempted by the devil for 40 days. Like I was explaining a second ago, that Jesus was every single temptation that we face and will face in the future, Jesus has already experienced, and he withstood that. He found his strength in God, and he was able to withstand that. And he wants us to know that we can find peace and rest in him, that we, through him, have the victory over all of sin and death, that like we explained a little bit earlier, that no temptation is too hard to withstand, that through him we have the strength and we have the victory that we need to withstand this temptation. In James chapter 1, verse 3, it says, "For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow." Sometimes we grow weary just facing all this temptation, and we just get super, what's the best word to say it? We just get super, weary. We start thinking like, wow, am I going to be able to withstand this forever? And we have to realize that when our faith is tested, we have a chance to grow in endurance. Endurance meaning that the best way to example is that, so if we're running, how long we can run. When we face temptation, it gets easier over time. It gets less tempting to do it when we grow in our endurance. And that's why it's so important and beneficial, and it's so motivating to know that. It's so motivating to know that when I have faced temptation, that it's not just me and facing it and then it's over, but it's me facing it and growing as a Christian, growing closer to God so that it's less tempting next time it comes at me. And like I was talking about earlier about David and how important it is for us to always stay alert, that's still active. Even though it's getting easier, we cannot sit back, because once we sit back and think like, okay, well, I'm good now, that's making yourself vulnerable to more temptation. Okay, so that was part 1 on temptation. Part 2 is going to be uploaded right after this, so go check that one out. And if you guys have any future video requests or any questions on this video, feel free to ask me them. My social medias will be in the description below. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.